Hi guys, Sharna here, back with another video for you. This time I'm featuring some older Lawn Fawn sets, so let's get to it. So I'm just going to start out with some Distress ink blending. This is the Distress Oxides. This first one here is Scattered Straw, and I am blending that on some Bristol Smooth cardstock with the blending brushes. I haven't decided whether I like these better or not, but they work for a quick background. And here I'm using worn lipstick, and I'm just going back and forth over that, trying to smooth it out a little bit. Not too concerned, as this is mostly going to be covered up. And then I'm going to go use some abandoned coral just to darken up the top. I'm going to bring that down just a little bit into the other color, just so I get a nice transition. And clean it up with a baby wipe and smooth that back out with the worn lipstick. So I just pressed some of the darkest abandoned coral on to the craft mat, and now I'm picking it up with a paintbrush and a little bit of scattered straw just to give some texture to the background and to the bottom. And my favorite for white splatters is the Copic Opaque White. It just stays white and it doesn't pick up the distress ink like some of my other colors do. I'm going to cut down the background just to make it A2 sized. And so here are the other products I'm going to use. The Slide On Over die, of course, Fairy Friends, and Gleeful Gardens, along with an older set, Gnome Sweet Gnome. Since I'm really looking forward to the new gnome set, I decided to get these out to play with it. I think it came out back in 2012. So I've already pre-cut my pieces here, and I'm deciding on a layout that I like that fits on the card. So I'm just gonna fiddle around here. I go back and forth quite a bit with this, just looking at the layout that I want, and it actually end up moving stuff around quite a bit compared to the finished card, but at least it gives me a starting point. So let's move on to the Copic coloring. All the colors are going to be listed in the lower left corner, but I'm starting with the E11 just to give some dimension under her hair, and blending that out with an E21, an E00, and then an E000. And then I decided that there wasn't enough dimension, so I added a tiny bit of E04, and I didn't even blend that out before moving on to the gnome skin tones, which are basically the same. So I'm just going to blend that out till it's smooth. Last one, E000. And I'm just going to add a tiny bit of dimension to the envelope with a C3 marker and blend that out with a colorless blender. And then I decided for her wings I was going to do the BG colors. So I'm using BG70 and BG72. If you're new to my videos, I usually start with the darkest marker and then blend out. So I wanted to keep in the same color family. I'm just going to start one darker and start with the BG78 and blend that out with the BG75 and then the BG72. And depending on how much you lay down of each marker is going to make that dress significantly darker than her wings. I'm sorry, that's actually too darker, but anyways, I wanted to keep the grass in the same family, so again with the BG markers. This time I'm starting darker with the BG99. These are more green than they are blue, unlike the other ones we just used, which have a little bit more of a teal color. These are definitely in the green family. They're a little bit more desaturated than some of the brighter green colors though, and I felt it went well with the background and with the colors of her dress and her wings. I built off the color of her dress since I picked that first, and tried to keep a smaller color palette and use similar colors on everything, so as to not have like 100 markers to list. And it just makes the card a little bit more cohesive in my opinion. So I colored all the stems the same color as I colored the grass. I did color a couple extra grasses just in case I didn't know what my final layout was going to be. So I just wanted to make sure I had enough so I didn't have to stamp and color more things at the end. So I'm just taking the darkest color and filling in all the nooks and crannies and then extending that out. And then the tips will have the lightest color. And I take that all the way back up into the darkest just to smooth out everything. I think it gives you a better blend that way. Since my paper isn't saturated, I tend to not have a problem with bleeding. But if you do go back and forth with threads, you may get a little bit of bleeding at the end. But you can always color that over with a white pen, white gel pen. So I'm just using the same yellows that I used on the center of the flowers. Like I said, I did try and keep the colors to a minimum. So you'll see a lot of these colors get repeated. I also tried to stick to a more desaturated palette with these darker tones here in the blue to go with the BG colors. Again, in the 90 family, we'll keep the tones similar to the 90 family and the green grass up above. And again, starting with my darkest and leaving the highlight in the middle. I'm not really paying attention at all to any kind of light source. I'm just trying to add a little bit of dimension to each of these objects. When I don't have a specific layout in mind, I tend to do a center highlight just so that it doesn't look funny if I end up putting it on the opposite side of where I had planned originally. Sometimes the hardest part about a card to me is actually picking the colors to color everything in with. And I started with the peachy tones. I knew that's what I wanted to use. It's the color of the year, so I've been really inspired by all the artwork that I've been seeing. And I wanted some colors that worked off of that. And so you'll find the peachy tones I've repeated, or I tried to repeat all the way across the card. It's in the flowers and his shirt. Anything that I could pick out that I knew I was going to color a certain color, like the tops of the mushrooms here, are also going to be in that same red family. And it's more of a peachy red as opposed to like a true red, just by switching out a few of the darker tones. It throws it more peach to me. But when I'm stuck, I will pick out parts of each image that I know I'm going to color, like the skin tones, the black on his shoes, on his belt buckle, the grasses, flowers, and I work my way out from there. At least it gives me a starting point so that I can see how many extra colors I need after that, and then I can decide where I want to go. So that's what helped me originally when I wanted to pick out the blue for his hat and his jeans. I try and use the color at least twice, preferably 3 times, across the card in various tones or shades. So I did his hat and I did his pants in the same color, the greens and the grasses, going with the blue-green in her dress, just to carry it across. So I just tried to make the bases of all the mushrooms the same, even though one's the house. I just used a couple shades of gray to add dimension in the shadows, and I did that across all of them, again, just so they're cohesive. I did think about doing the brown, but I thought that would blend too much with the background, and I did want them to pop off the background a little bit, so just trying to add a little bit of shadow here and there and get rid of some of the bleeding that I had with the red. I colored the last mushroom the same, and then again with the pink, just trying to tie it all together, not add more colors. I went with the pink, and then I tied in again her dress. I used the same BG colors for the shell. So now that he's done, I'm going to try and finalize my layout here. I'm just going to play around, still deciding where I want everything. making sure I have enough images colored. And I didn't finish the bird because I wasn't sure if I was going to include him or not. And then I started on her hair. I wanted to give her a little bit of a reddish blonde hair color. Still struggling with this color. I want a really good strawberry blonde since that's my own hair color, but I haven't been really satisfied, but this is the closest I've come so far. And I want her to look like she's delivering the letter to the little gnome. And I do want her to be front and center, so I wanted to get it close to center as I could. And I'm just going to color in the little birdie with the BG colors. Too cute. So I've basically got everything colored that I want to include in the card. And I decided that I wanted everything up from the bottom a little bit more than what I had originally laid out. And I don't end up using the clouds even though I show them here. That's why I didn't show the coloring, but I used a little bit of BG10 on those just along the bottom there, in case you're wondering. So now I'm going to cut the track out on a little bit of an angle in the center. That's the most important piece to me, and everything can be built around that. I'm using one of these little slider doodad thingies from My Favorite Things. I really like them. I did make a mistake here, and I'm trying to put these all in bunches, but I glued this down and I put that flower right there, right in the way of my track, and it's pretty on there secure, so there's a little bump out that I do end up trimming off because it gets in the way of the slider. So always be aware before you glue things down. Just makes it easier for me when I have things set up in groups like that I can just glue them to each other and then glue them onto the card. And I'm just trying to see where she's going to stop before I glue him down. Put the little letter in her hand. Never really notice things until you're watching yourself. I do twiddle my thumbs a lot trying to make decisions. So I'm just adding a little bit of extra glue back behind that, the gnome and the flower. And here's where I'm going to lose the clouds because I decided I wanted my sentiment up there and there was just no good place to put them after that. I chose the I Love You So Much sentiment from the Gleeful Gardens. So I'm just going to get that centered in the Misty here. And I also glued on the little bird before I lost him. And first I'm going to stamp it down in some abandoned coral in the Distress Oxides. I did that a few times, but it was blending in just a little bit too much for me, so I switched over to the Festive Berries. The oxides do stamp really well, so I don't mind using them for sentiments, unlike the Distress inks. So that's the basic layout of the card. I just need to add the moving mechanism and get that all ready to go. I did realize I forgot my little snail, so I'm going to tuck him in right under there. And now I'm deciding how I want to add her onto the strip. Now, I made a mistake here, and I just used a part of the card that I had cut off for the actual slider piece, and I really wish I had used a penny. I normally use a penny, and here I'm just fitting that in so that it blends into the background seamlessly. It's easier for me to just glue it flat to the card, and since it's A2 sized, I know it's going to be easy to line back up again. I'm just adding a little bit of foam tape so that there's room for that slider mechanism to move around. And I only used one layer. Normally that's okay, especially if I'm using a penny. Since the penny's heavy enough that when you tilt the card back and forth it's going to move really well. But I use the paper here, and while it does move, it takes a little bit more fiddling with it. I think if I had rounded the edges or used a circle punch, it probably would have moved better, but those corners tend to catch on like everything. But the more you play with it, the easier it moves. So I'm just gonna peel off all the foam tape and get it ready to lay it back down. And make sure that's lined up so that the background looks seamless. And I'm checking to make sure it moves, just in case I have to pull it back apart. And then I'm going to glue her down where I want her to end up at, just so I make sure she's not down there. And now you can see me fiddling with it, trying to get it to move. And then I freaked because I thought it was stuck. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the powder. This makes sure that there's no adhesive anywhere, just makes it slide much better. And the more you slide it back and forth, the easier it moves. So I played with it a lot. It's really hard to stop playing with. And as an added little embellishment, I'm going to add glitter to the wings. It's really hard to see on camera and it's really hard to catch in the pictures, but if you've ever used it, it makes a really big difference in real life. That's me trying to catch it. And that's the whole card. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Bye.